All right, so straight to Nigeria now, where some Nigerians took to the streets on the weekend on Saturday, 12th of June, to say democracy is under threat from rising insecurity and bad governance. Now, the Democracy Day demonstrations came as President Muhammadu Buhari has been struggling to control terrorism, criminal abductions, and separatist movements. Now, just 2 weeks ago, President Buhari suspended Twitter after he deleted a controversial tweet of his, and some Nigerians have described the act as a dictatorial punishment against free speech and expression.
Now, Saturday's protest started early across many Nigerian states, including Lagos, Oyo, Ondo, Port Harcourt, Ibadan, and the capital, which is Abuja, with protesters wielding placards and demanding an end to insecurity and what they called systemic oppression. Now, there were reports of some protesters being tear-gassed and gunshots were fired in the air to disperse the protesters. Now, one may want to ask, when does peaceful protest become a criminal offense in the country?
Quite interesting questions. Now, we have correspondents who were monitoring the protests on Saturday at different centers, Bernard Akede and Mary Chinda. Well, good morning, Bernard. Good morning to you, Mary.
All right, well, we'll start with Mary Chinda this morning. All right, Mary Chinda, you were at different locations during the whole demonstration and the celebration that happened on June 12, which was on Saturday of 2020. Can you tell us what your observations were?
Well, it was far away from a celebration. This was not a celebration at all. It was a June 12th that was full of fear, apprehension, tension, shops locked, markets locked, people in their houses, unsure of what the day was going to be like. If you looked at the report that we filed in, you realize that there were very few people on the streets, on the very busy road of Allen in Ikeja. You'll find just a handful, just a handful of people. I was also at the Lekki axis, that's the Lekki toll gate area, where everybody thought that that was going to be a rally point for people to protest, just like it was in October of 2020 when we had the NSAS crisis. And there were no people there, only a heavy presence of security men. And the security men were even very hostile to people who were doing their early morning jogging. And the language was, look, we're here, there's nothing you can do, you better watch out, you better not come here, we don't want no protest that is reminiscent of the NSAS crisis, so you just better go away. So it was not a celebration at all. It was a democracy day that was full of fear and apprehension for Lagos residents.
All right, Mary Chinda, you clearly had different locations covered on that very Saturday. So, and you also spoke to some of the security agencies, if I'm not mistaken, the Civil Defense Commands. Now, what was their mood? What were they saying to journalists? Was the protest illegal, or was there a sense of, oh, you can protest, but do not damage property and do not get mixed up with hoodlums? What was their stance?
Well, it was a clear case of, we understand you've done this NSAS thing before. We understand you have a right to protest, but could you do it peacefully? Especially when I spoke with the Civil Defense Corps commander in Lagos, who was actually saying to the protesters, you are young people, Nigeria is going to be fine, the government is listening to you, but can you just keep it peaceful? And now that was away from what had happened at Ojota, where clearly my colleague Bernard Akede caught people, got shots of people who were being protesters who were being apprehended by the Nigerian police, and they were being malhandled. And then you begin to wonder what kind of a democracy that we have, where people are not, where protesters are treated like common criminals on the streets.
All right, Mary Chinda, now looking at some of the video clips that we saw over the weekend, you gave reports as well as Ben Akede. We realized that some non-protesters were also arrested, and alongside with those who actually came out to protest. Can you give us a little update on that? Has anyone been released? Are they still in custody as we speak?
Yeah, but my colleague followed that report, and I was watching it and I was monitoring what was going on there. So just before he actually left the scene, the protesters who were apprehended were actually released, and that was because that in itself got not just the local Nigerian media and people talking, but international media also got a wind of what was going on. So protesters who were arrested were actually released, before the end of the day. We also found out that at that same spot, the Nigerian celebrity, Mr. Macaroni, was also there, even though he was not manhandled, but he was also there to register his presence at the protest. So people who were actually picked up by the Nigerian police were discharged or were released, before the end of the day. But if you also look at some of the interviews that I did with very passionate protesters, they were saying that away from people who have been apprehended at this protest, there are other people who were involved in the NSAS protest. There were other persons who were involved in various protests who are currently in police custody. And Nigerian youths were saying, release these people. Protesters are not criminals. They are only trying to say to government, you need to do this right. And what was the essence of the protest? They were protesting for adequate security, protesting for good governance, protesting to ensure that they have a Nigeria that works. And this is over 60 years after democracy.
Okay, we still have Bernard Akede with us right now. Bernard, good morning to you. You were clearly at the Ojota area where protesters were tear gassed, as we all saw, not just Nigeria, the Africa, the world. So tear gas, even you yourself perhaps got some bit in your eyes. So tell us the scenarios of what really happened on that day.
Thank you and good morning, guys. Well, like the pictures you can see on the screen, yes, protesters were tear gas. But I would like to correct an impression, first of all. Now, the young man you can see on the screen presently, that's Gbenga Komalafe, Comrade Gbenga Komalafe, calls himself, who's the co-coordinator of Coalition for Revolution. He did state clearly that the protesters got to a certain point and the police had asked the protesters to remain at that position because from there, the police would be able to protect them. So the police did say. But the protesters said they didn't feel comfortable there, which is why they continued to march on. Now, the police also did say that they had fears and they also got information that the people around, some of the, I don't like to use the word hoodlums, but that's the word they use, that the hoodlums around may take advantage of the protest and hijack it, just as it happened during the NSAS protest. And the police said if that happens, they may not have the capacity to control what may go wrong at that particular point. So they tried to ward off the protesters. Now, I'm not justifying the use of bullets or the use of tear gas in dispersing the crowd, but I think there should be some kind of rearrangement when it comes to protesting, particularly in this part of the world. Certain protests should have some kind of organization and organized leadership such that the movement doesn't get hijacked. Sadly, I also think that the police should adjust their ways when it comes to dispersing the crowd and when it comes to handling protests. Clearly, it got out of hand. People were tear gassed, including myself. Shots were fired into the air. Nobody was shot, as far as I can tell. And those who were apprehended in my presence eventually were released before we left there. But ultimately, it was very, very dramatic. It was quite eventful. And I don't believe this is the way protests should be done anywhere in the world.
All right. Thank you so much, Bernard. Let's now bring in Ikemesid Effiong. He is the head of research for SBM Intelligence, which provides analysis of the Nigerian social, political, and economic situation. Good morning, Effiong.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
All right, Effiong, let's go right into it. What do you make of the events that happened on Saturday, June 12 of 2021?
What we saw with the upswell of protests in certain locations, not just in Lagos, but in other pockets of the country, is that there remains a significant appetite for political engagement in Nigeria. I think when you situate the events of Saturday within the context of October 2020, as well as a much smaller protest efforts in January, right? Of this year, it's clear that on a lot of the issues that are of importance to a wide basket of Nigerians, there appears to be little engagement on the side of government, there is the perception by lots of Nigerians that democracy isn't still isn't still working for them. They can't see it in their wallets. They can't feel it in household spending, right? And democracy clearly has some work to do in terms of showing up in an increase in the standard of living of Nigerians. And I think that continued disaffection and frustration with the performance of the Nigerian elites, and you saw that on display right on June 12, despite repeated warnings by government, despite many calls by many sections of civil society as well as stakeholders, that Nigerians stay at home. You still found enough Nigerians who thought that the risks, right, of actually being on the streets was worth it, in light of the current political and economic situation in the country.
All right, Effiong, it's been 22 years since the return to democracy for Nigeria. Going by the recent events across the country, would you say, Nigeria is truly a democratic nation, and with this democratic exercise, how would you rate it based on, 22 years of observation of democracy practice since 1999?
Well, I would say it could be better. Nigeria is certainly not a perfect democracy. There are a number of institutions that rank Nigeria as a flawed democracy. We certainly do elections, but we haven't gotten the election practice right. An uncomfortably high number of Nigerians with their blood and with their lives, come election season. There's something to be said around how well elected representatives at the federal, state, and local level continue to engage with voters and with citizens in non-election years. A lot of the things that are supposed to be the priorities of any given civilian government, the provision of social services, infrastructure, as well as, undergoing, painful but necessary economic reforms to set Nigeria's economy on a path towards becoming a proper 21st century economy. Very little has been done in that light. So in terms of the broad contour lines of democratic practice, Nigeria has largely held up right over the last 2 decades and 2 decades and change. But in terms of to use a tired phrase in this part, in terms of seeing the dividends of democracy, in terms of democracy actually producing, a positive social goods, right? Nigerian democracy, 22 years on, right, still has a very long way to go in terms of showing that it is capable of doing that. And I think, that's why you see a lot of calls, right, from stakeholders in disparate parts of this country, for some form of structural and systemic reforms. You've got some stakeholders on the fringes of Nigerian politics who have gone the entire 9 years and are calling for an actual breakup of the entire system. It's because of that democratic disaffection.
Okay, so Bernard Akede, we need to ask you this question. Do you share the same sentiments that Effiong has just given to us?
Well, yes, I actually do. Well, maybe not totally, but yes, I actually do. I also think that there needs to be a lot of sensitization on both sides, the side of the police, side of government, and side of people when it comes to protesting and what exactly it is. But again, you should understand that there's so much distrust right now from the people to the government, such that regardless of what the government says, the people don't trust the government anymore. Sadly, I do remember again that Saturday. There was one of the protesters, the leader of that particular march, was speaking to one of the police officers in charge, saying, we did send a written document to the police commissioner in Lagos concerning this protest. And remember that in the papers and in the news, the police commissioner said he didn't receive any information concerning the protest. He wasn't aware of the protest. So there's been a lot of back and forth. I think there should be more information, there should be more awareness created. And the government needs to create more trust in the people when it comes to their rights and what they can do.
All right, quick one, Bernard, and to you, Effiong, before we let you gentlemen go. We just celebrated June 12, but from the events of Saturday, it looks like it was nowhere near a celebration. From Lagos to Abuja, Port Harcourt, it was more like, protest and dissatisfaction. Would you say that's the case? Hello, Effiong.
As with many things, as with many things that have become, inherent in Nigerian democracy, I think that's the case. I think, despite the fact that, Saturday, June 12th on Saturday was less of, of a celebration and more of, yet another statement by, a plurality of the Nigerian electorate that they aren't satisfied with what's going on. I think, it's completely par for the course. Par for the course with democracies, right? In democracy, I think, as one observer described it, right, is a never-ending set of unaccomplished expectations, right? And I don't think that Nigeria is anywhere close, right, to the point where we can look at actual tangible benefits and go, oh yes, we can celebrate A, B, C, D, E. We're very far from that, right? And so I think moments in moments in Nigerian history like that, like June 12, serve as just another marker and just another reminder.
Thank you
that
very much.
We've made.
Thank you very much, Effiong. Thank you so much, Bernard. I suppose for you there was no celebration. You clearly had your eyes tear gas, so. Right, Bernard. All right. Well, we'll carry on nonetheless. Now, Bernard Ekede himself, you just saw with us right here on NewsCenter, our correspondent, was quite busy on Saturday covering the protest, and he found in this report.
What started out looking like a quiet day turned out to be a dramatic and eventful democracy day.
The police is beginning to shoot tear gas canisters. That's the third one going up. If you can hear me now, the police have just fired 3 canisters of tear gas.
The Gani Fawemi Park in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital, was the scene for a planned protest scheduled for June 12, Nigeria's new Democracy Day. The day commemorates the annulment of the election won by MKO Abiola in 1993, an election that many have tagged the freest and fairest election held in Nigeria, and some Nigerian youths decided to air their grievances at what they called bad governance. The park was peaceful and quiet initially, but later a crowd of protesters soon approached, chanting songs of solidarity. The police soon swung into action, shooting canisters of tear gas and shooting bullets into the air to disperse the crowd. Some protesters were apprehended but were later released.
Police wanted to confine us to that space, which we felt was not too safe for us because, it's middle of nowhere. But they said there are hoodlums there. But we believe all Nigerians are partakers in the sufferings of the land right now. As far as we are concerned, the hoodlums are products. They were made hoodlums by this system. So we don't recognize hoodlums, but we always insist that our protest must be peaceful. Our statement must be made very strongly, but in a very peaceful manner, because when you allow it to degenerate, it distracts attention from what we're actually saying. My appeal is no longer to the deaf and dumb politicians. My appeal is to Nigerian people to come out, to begin to say in their millions. And that's what we did in June 12th. That was how we forced out the military. Exactly. It is time we come out again to say enough is enough.
The crowd of protesters later left the area as more police personnel arrived and took charge. Other parts of the state remained peaceful and calm as most Lagosians spent the rest of the day indoors. Bernard Ekede, News Central.